Welcome to People Behind the Power, part of the Metric Podcast Network. Data centers are the backbone of the digital world, but behind every facility, every build, and every operational decision, there are people making it happen. Every episode, we sit down with the leaders driving the data center industry forward, the careers they've built, the teams they've scaled, and what it actually takes to deliver at the pace this sector demands. A Metric DCX production. This is People Behind the Power. We're here in New York with Jake Grimm, Director of Preconstruction at Shawmut Design and Construction. Jake, thanks for joining the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'm Jake Grimm. Like he said, I'm the Director of Preconstruction for our Mission Critical Department at Shawmut. A little bit about us. We are a just shy of $3 billion company, right, revenue-wise, getting into the mission critical space, building out a team, trying to be, find successful individuals, looking for those with the correct soft skills, trying to find the strategic projects that will set us up for sustainable growth, right? And I think a lot of what you're going to hear from myself today is about sustainable growth and finding team members that fit the Shawmut culture, because that's, for us, that's our biggest, selling point as a company, is the culture, being an employee-owned company and making sure that we're finding people that want to be a part of that and are excited about it.
Great. Well, no, thanks for the insight there. Obviously, in your career, you were with HIT, you were with Suffolk. What is it about Shawmut's culture that is unique and appealing for you?
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, I think that the employee ownership aspect, it carries through to the actual culture, right? Like, it's not just a added benefit, right? At the end of the day, it really carries a culture of ownership and accountability. And there's a community aspect to it. Everybody really cares about every job we do. We want to be successful because at the end of the day, if I'm successful, if the people here in the New York office are successful, we're all more successful. And we want to bring that everywhere we go, right? Like, our motto, we always say, is bike, love, service, right? And that applies to each other. It applies to our clients. It applies to just how we treat the culture. Is we want to make sure everybody feels like they're being taken care of at the best that we possibly can.
Great. So how did you get into this industry?
Yeah, so I started out as a laborer in high school, working summers, rebuilding college dorms. Definitely some horror stories there, right? Being hanging drywall and taking down drop ceilings. But, from there, I went to Temple University for construction management, kind of made my way through a bunch of different internships. Like I said, a lot of horror stories throughout those, right? Building in the city and navigating that as a young professional. But I always knew I wanted to end up building something. I always liked shaping the world around me. I always liked being able to drive around and be like, hey, I did that thing, right? Like, I thought that was always a neat aspect of construction. And even more so, maybe with the data center world, they're a little more remote, so you can't necessarily drive around and say, hey, I did that thing, but you can open up your phone and go on Instagram, you can go on Facebook or wherever, and you can say, like, hey, the things that we're being a part of here is shaping the world. We're helping drive the healthcare industry. We're helping drive technology further in the world. And I think that's meaningful and rewarding.
Great. How many years have you been in the data center space for now?
About 7.
Great. And even 7 years ago, did you foresee what it's become?
No. I always joke. So when I started at HIT, I had just came out of a very small mechanical contractor in Philadelphia, little design build firm. At the time, we were doing just shy of $20 million a year in revenue, and that was a great year for us, right? I started at HIT. I told them, I was like, I don't even know what a data center is, right? And they were like, well, we'll teach you, right? And they sure did. So no, I honestly never could have imagined it, going on to multi-billion-dollar contracts and things like that, where, my day-to-day back in Philly was $10,000 contracts or even $3,000 contracts, and just trying to stack as many of those as you can for service work and things like that. So it's definitely been a wild ride. It's a fun wave to ride, right? And I'm excited to see where it keeps going.
Great. Thanks for the insight. I imagine, especially in pre-construction, that level of scale is probably been crazy to experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've even from 5-6 years ago, trying to bid out, I'll call it $5 billion a year, trying to hit that first $1 billion in revenue, to now 10 to 15, and each project's getting bigger and bigger, right? Like, we're bidding projects that are the equivalent of more than a yearly revenue 5 years ago, right, for a mission critical department. Wow. So they just keep growing, but they're getting more efficient, they're getting more interesting. And as it keeps going, there's a lot of efficiency to be had. There's a lot of culture to build within the industry, and I think that it's going really good places.
Great. How did you specifically get into pre-construction?
Yeah, I was working in the field. Decided, I was an office cat at the end of the day. I decided that, getting up and getting out to the site at 6 a.m. wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. A lot of respect for those who do it. But at the end of the day, I liked kind of I'll call it like the conceptual portion of it. I liked building the thing in my head and kind of driving that instead of being on site necessarily and being boots on the ground. A large part of that for me also is I like the variability, right? It's a new thing to do every once in a while. I'm not the kind of guy who can go sit out on a job for a couple of years and see it all the way through. I like to check in on them, see how they're going. But I'm definitely the kind of guy who I like to, especially in mission critical, right? You do your RFP, you move on to the next one, right? And so I like that kind of fast-paced environment, ever-changing, kind of keeps things fresher.
Perfect. And when did you realize that leadership specifically as well, was the path within pre-construction?
Yeah, I mean, even outside of pre-construction, taking a step back, I've always kind of found myself in leadership positions, even going back to high school, right? Like I'm a band geek at heart. I was in the marching band and drum and bugle corps, and I always found myself elevated to a point of being like a captain of something, or captain of the soccer team, and then in a college, same way, bringing that experience forward. So I always thought of myself as somebody who I like to lead teams. I like to operate with people, right? I always say, like, as long as you care, we can teach anybody anything, right? And anything's learnable. But like those kind of soft skills are what differentiates leaders from not, right? And I always thought of myself as somebody who could apply those skills and be a leader in this industry.
So what's your approach to building high-performance teams? What is it that you would look for that you can't necessarily see on a CV or a resume?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you get a resume in, right, everybody's looks great for the most part, right? It's hard to read between the lines and see kind of what they're trying to say through that. So obviously we get into the conversation with them, and what we want to try to gauge is those soft skills, like I was saying earlier, right? Like myself at least, when I'm building my team, I want somebody that obviously has the technical acumen, right? I mean, that's base one. But we need to continue forward into, do you like to teach people, right? Are you a leader in a department? Do you like to impart your knowledge onto others? And something that, applicably as we build our team here at Shawmut, right? We're a brand new department within a medium to large size company, right? And there's a lot of people who don't even know what a data center is, or if they do, they just see it in the news, right? And a lot of our charge as pre-con and building professionals at Shawmut is to teach and impart our knowledge on others. Because like I said, everybody wants to be a part of it. Every time I turn around, somebody's like, how can I help? How can I get in on this? So for me, it's being a part of that team culture, right? Is I'm on the base level understanding that if you're coming onto the team, you know enough about the industry to be able to perform the work. But for me, I think it's being a leader, being a teacher, and you hear me say this a lot, being elastic and being adaptive, right, is what I always say.
So you've spoken about the things that you look for when you're interviewing someone, having the soft skills to be successful and, being partnership driven and enthusiastic. Mm-hmm. How do you screen for that? Is that a vibe that you try and interpret during an interview? Are there specific questions that you might ask?
Yeah, so during an interview, I really want to suss out how somebody involves in a team, right? Have they had direct reports before? Explain to me how you've trained others. Explain to me kind of your appetite for being somebody that leads others to perform as well as they think that they should be performing themselves, right? On top of that, being adaptive, being elastic is, a lot of these RFPs, they're quick running, right? A lot of the designs are a bit repetitive, but at the end of the day, everyone's different. And at the end of the day, you're managing your client as well. So things come fast, things come quick. You never know when you're going to get a call and they're like, hey, never mind, I actually need a price from you by Friday, and it's Wednesday, right? And so the kind of things that I want to kind of gauge in the interview process is how do you respond to something like that, right? How do you adapt? How do you make sure that your team isn't feeling the stress that you just got on yourself, and you're making sure that you're captaining the ship and making sure that, the tide isn't getting out of control, so to say, right? How do we make sure that the team is operating efficiently and they don't feel as though, they're about to fall off the boat?
Perfect. I think it's important as a leader to be a filter from
Absolutely.
above, and to turn the energy into motivation. So, great point there. One question then, how do you develop talent internally versus, bringing in an external experience?
Yeah, great point there. Like I was just saying, here at Shawmut, we have a lot of people that don't do data center work, right? And they're about to, right? And they're excited about it. And it's been an extraordinarily welcoming and collaborative environment. But myself and our head of mission critical, Joel, we always joke about, we're going to have a lot of ground to cover on what makes a mission critical building, what makes a data center different than building a high rise in Boston, or building out a tenant fit out in Manhattan, right? So for us, it's about bringing in the correct players in the senior leadership, roster, so to say, is making sure that these people are coming in and they're willing to develop internal talent. As we build our team and we start filling out those more junior roles, I want to make sure that those people are coming up with the Shawmut way, right? And making sure that we're doing things correctly and making sure that they're adaptive, they're able to, morph to the mission critical world. And if those people are transitioning from, Shawmut commercial, so to say, or, the general estimating department, we are completely open and willing to train them as such, right? Set up trainings, set up, lunch and learns. Just, hey, come talk to us about data centers. Let's talk about the gotchas, right? Let's talk about the things that the demons in the closet that we hear about 9 months down the road when the PM calls me. He's like, what was that, right? So that's the kind of things that I think we're really trying to impart is, there's always going to be, quirks in every kind of construction, but how do we bring the mission critical quirks, the Shawmut, and get people up to speed on that?
Perfect. Thanks for answering that. I think you obviously spoke about it there. You have a real unique opportunity to shape the culture when you're at the beginning of the development of a division. So no, I think it's really exciting time. I think when you evaluate the current talent landscape, what do you feel like's changed over the past 3 or even 7 years since you've been in the data center space, and what roles would you say are the hardest to fill?
The speed is it, right? You and I were at dinner last night. We were talking about it. It's getting faster and faster and faster to hire people, right? It's a mad dash for good talent, so to say, and that's hard when we're talking about all these soft skills. You want to take the appropriate time and measure to make sure that their culture fits, right? I think that's the biggest challenge right now is, the availability of talent combined with making sure that you're competitively timed but also being a good steward to your company and making sure that you're hiring somebody with the Shawmut culture, because the fact of the matter is that's the biggest strength Shawmut has is the culture and the service. And if we want to bring on people that do that, they have that in spades. So that's, I think, the most difficult thing for me. I mean, pre-construction professionals are hard to find, right? I think that there's a lot of great ones out there. It's, with how fast things are going, sometimes it's hard to see through the weeds and be able to look at other opportunities. So I think that's probably, for myself, the most difficult one. But at the end of the day, I think, we just have to face those challenges as they come and try to suss out who's going to be a good leader and who's going to be, Shawmut proud, so to say.
You mentioned speed there. I think I completely agree. That is definitely what I've experienced as well in the market, recruiting for the last 3.5 years in the data center space. I think when you think about it, it's important to balance the due diligence and the screening whilst balancing that with the speed to hire so that you're competitive. How do you balance that?
So it's, I'll give you an interesting allegory here. It's the same as pre-construction in my mind, right? Especially mission critical pre-construction is you have this delicate dichotomy of quick and accurate, right? And it's the same thing with recruiting people. You got to be quick, but you got to be thorough, right? So I think it's about collaboration with your recruiting team. It's your internal recruiters. They're all underwater. Shout out to all of them around the world. You guys are doing your best, and we all appreciate it. Making sure that you're available, right? I think that the hardest thing for an internal recruiting or a recruiting manager is when they ask you to interview somebody and you tell them you can't talk to them for a week and a half, right? We're kind of handcuffing them at that point, and we don't want to be the bottleneck at the end of the day. So, we talk about it internally all the time. Is if our people come to us with a candidate and we see a resume and we're like, okay, we really want to talk to this person, be available, right, and move things around because right now, I mean, I'm sure that you are well aware of this. Is staffing is one of the biggest challenges in the industry, if not the biggest challenge in the industry for general contractors. So we got to make sure it's a top priority. Is really it.
That's a great point. When we were at dinner last night, we were speaking about being proactive rather than reactive when it comes to hiring, and I think that's a great point. In the best partnerships that I've had have been where the hiring managers are, fundamental about hiring being a integral part of their role. You know, whereas, you know, everyone's busy in this industry. Sometimes you do work with organizations where they can't make, you know, time that week, but that is where you will lose out on great people.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think that's a great point. So Jake, what motivates you to continue pursuing your career path in the mission critical space?
For me, it's a growing team. I love managing people. I love people. I actually moved to Boston recently, so I would stop working fully remote. I like being around a team and building a culture. So for me, you know, as this industry continues to grow, Shawmut will continue to grow. And, you know, for me, it's really rewarding to be able to foster careers for people, give them a way to support their families, go on exciting vacations, buy a home, things like that. That's the part of the business that, you know, at the end of the day, if I were to move on or if I were to go somewhere else, you know, the things that are really rewarding to think about is, you know, we've all done exciting projects, we've all done this kind of thing, but affecting people's lives in a positive way is really like my driver. It's what keeps me going in the morning, so to say.
Great. Would you say that that's the most satisfying aspect of leadership in your experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, you know, it's not about being in control. It's not about doing things the way I want to do them. I will tell you till the cows come home that I don't know every right way to do things. I know one or two of them, and I'll try them out. But, you know, for me, it's the people aspect of it is what's important about leading and giving people a nice place to come to every day. You know, fact of the matter is you spend more time with your coworkers than your spouse half the time, right? You're there for 8 hours a day and you're only home for 4 at night, right? And so the fact of the matter is I like making sure that I'm building that culture with people and giving them a rewarding place to work as well.
Agreed. I think if you build the right high-performance culture, it pushes you to become a better version of yourself as well.
Absolutely.
You know, the saying that you are the sum of the 6 people that you spend your most time around. If you have low standards for those at work, then it's harder to hold yourself to high standards.
Absolutely. And from a business success standpoint, it's the same way. You know, I always look at that as, you know, two sides of the same coin, right? Is being a great leader is personally rewarding, but being a great leader also makes your employees happy and you have less turnover, right? And you build a stronger culture, and a stronger culture at the end of the day means you win more work, right? People work better together and you have a more successful business unit.
Especially with the growth of this division, you know, it will just compound. You know, the good habits and values that businesses have and the bad ones, they compound as you grow. So, you know, we mentioned earlier, you've got such a unique opportunity to shape the growth of the culture of the mission critical division at Shawmut. We were speaking about this previously. Quite a challenging question, but if you were to leave the industry tomorrow, you know, what traits would your successor need to have to be successful?
Technical acumen, right? You got to be able to talk. You got to be able to talk the talk, right? Being a people person, I think in general is an important trait of, you know, a leader. At the end of the day, you're leading your team. You're talking to clients. You're talking to subcontractors. Just being personable and being empathetic to what they are going through as well. I think that's a big strategy or a strategic advantage. Sorry. But those are the two big ones for me, is making sure that you are able to build a building, right? You need to know what you're doing, but also being a people person and being able to navigate interpersonal relationships within the workplace.
Great. And to kind of go into a bit of a deeper dive there,
sure.
What are the best things that you've seen from leaders that you've worked for? You know, is it those things? Are there additional traits that you aspire for? You know, what is it that you've seen from the great leaders you've worked with? Yeah,
calmness for one, right? Nobody needs a fire drill every day. You know, we want to make sure that anybody you work with, coworkers, employees of yours, anybody feels like they are coming into a stable, secure place to work. You know, shout out to my old boss at HIT, Gail Susan. He was great at that. He was a very poised leader. You know, he was very good at kind of shielding the not my problems from me. So that's definitely a good one. Understanding what your employees are going through. You know, understanding the people who you're leading. What are they going through and how do you adapt to that, right? Being adaptive and elastic doesn't just apply to doing the work, right? It applies to your relationships with your coworkers and your partners. You know, it's very important that people feel like they're heard and seen. And so that's, I think, the two that I would probably point out.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Who in the industry should we be speaking to next?
What I would love to see on your guys' podcast next is somebody from the younger portion of the generation, you know, the up-and-comers. I think that with, you know, a lot of these panels, a lot of these shows, you see the high-level executives, you see the people like myself who are already ingrained in the industry, right? But somebody fresh out of school, maybe somebody who's starting their career in mission critical later in their career even. I would like to know their perspective and see kind of how they talk about this, right? At the end of the day, they're also mortgaging their future on this industry, and they're less ingrained in it. So what made them get into this, and what makes them excited about continuing to do it?
That's a great point. Understanding what motivates the younger generation is going to be really important as we drive this industry forward, because
Absolutely.
It's so dynamic. It's, everyone has to be so committed to be successful in this industry, but the upside is huge. It's not really like anything that we've seen for a long time in construction.
Absolutely.
So Jake, to close the podcast, we usually do a rapid fire closer. So there's going to be 3 questions. Love to get your thoughts on them. First question is, what's the best piece of career advice that you've ever received?
Treat your subcontractors like partners, not employees.
Love that. Great answer. What's one trait that every leader in the mission critical space needs in 2026?
Empathy. Understanding what other people are going through, even what your clients are going through. There's a personal advantage to that. There's a strategic advantage to that, right? Understanding what your client needs, understanding what the people around you need is going to give you a lot of advantages, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes.
Great. And that links exactly to your first point about treating subcontractors like partners, not employees.
Absolutely. Perfect.
And finally, what's one book, podcast, or person that you've engaged with recently that's inspired you?
I have an old coworker of mine from Hit Contract. His name's Dave Fearman. He taught me I'll call it the calm in the storm, right? When things seem to be, it's the Wizard of Oz and your house is flying off of Kansas, he's the one with his feet on the ground, right? And I think that's a valuable lesson for anybody in mission critical in general. There's a lot of stress rolling around here. We need to make sure that you're able to keep your feet planted.
Well, Jake, thanks for joining the podcast. It's been a real pleasure understanding more about what motivates you and what great leadership looks like in the industry. So real pleasure meeting you in person. And thanks for joining again.
Great. Thanks for having me. Happy to be on.
No problem. Thank you.